Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1235 of the Locked on Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday. And today's podcast will be myself and Mark Schindler with part 2 of 2. Mark Schindler joined us on Friday to talk about the Hawks, what transpired in the playoffs, etc. If you missed that podcast, it is still available. Check it out today. But today's episode that you're watching or listening to right now will be myself and Mark talking about the NBA draft, sort of an overview of sorts, Mark's top guys, his favorite guys, some Hawks options in the middle of the first round, etc. A fun conversation to be sure. Not a ton of news in Hawks land at this point in time, but plenty to come on the show. Please subscribe to the podcast and make it your first listen each and every day on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. But without further delay, you'll hear the intro, and I'll be back with myself and Mark Schindler talking about the NBA draft.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I am once again joined by friend of the podcast, Mark Schindler. And if you missed it, by the way, part 1, we talked about the Hawks and kind of what's going on with the roster now, what might be going on in the future with the Hawks. But part 2 here is going to be myself and Mark talking about the NBA draft. And Mark, we're getting closer. The lottery is like in a week and a half when we're talking now. We're almost there.
Yeah, it's kind of insane, man. It's been I don't know, my first I did scouting stuff last year, but this is my first first cycle where I've really been in on the ground floor since RIP. And I'm excited, man. I feel ready for it. I definitely have, there's a couple guys I want to brush up on more before we get closer to it. But it's kind of just, it's good. As soon as the draft hits or as soon as the lottery hits, like it feels like everything else just goes so quickly and it'll be summer league before we know it. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. And in my brain, for most of this podcast life, which was 2016 when I launched, there was this like 4-year period in the middle where like the draft was like a big part of the podcast because the Hawks were bad and like they kind of knew they were rebounding through the draft. And I didn't do a ton during the season because the Hawks were in a different place now. I mean, fans don't necessarily think about the draft all the time, but with the early exit and kind of ramping up now, and I'm still playing catch up too. I mean, you said this is a cycle you're kind of in start to finish. I'm probably further behind on this cycle than normal. So we're in different places this time around, which is probably good for our observations. I do want to ask about the very top of the draft later on, but because it's not necessarily Hawks related, I want to start with the Hawks stuff. So like broadly speaking, we talked about what the Hawks might need in the present tense on the part 1 of this podcast, but what do you make of them? Like and I guess this kind of goes to your overall philosophy too on the draft, but like archetype wise, like are you someone who is a need guy? Do you like to just go best player available? Like what's your kind of draft philosophy? And also like, especially for the Hawks, what would you be looking for them if it's sort of a tiebreaker and you're more of even if you're more of a top player available guy, like you got to break a tie, what are you looking for the Hawks?
Oh, I'm like the really annoying nuanced guy. I think me and Jake kind of disagree on it sometimes. Like he's obviously really smart and knows what he's talking about, but like we're mostly in line with it. But like I look at it more like I think fit is so much more important than it tends to get credit for. Because like we're talking about, like I hit on it a little bit with Jalen. Like I'm not super worried about Jalen and like being squeezed out or anything, but it's to me like, okay, let's say that the Hawks somehow got the 7th pick and drafted Shaedon Sharpe. And I'm just like, okay, for what? Like I'm not to be rude. Like he's somebody who I definitely need to brush up more on because I've seen his EYBL stuff, but that's from a year ago, so it's really hard.
It's a tough scout when he hasn't played basketball in a year.
Exactly. But what makes it so difficult is like, okay, I like Shaedon Sharpe. I think he's a really high upside player. He has a lot of awesome shot creation tools. Is he going to really get the opportunity to flex those with Atlanta or a team that isn't really built to put him in those positions? Like, I just know watching like where I'm at with this team and how Nate is as a coach, I would not like, I obviously won't say like do not draft or anything, but like even if Shaedon fell to like 10 or 11, like I would really struggle with the Hawks taking him just because I'd want to know what's your concrete development plan to get the most out of him. And also too, like, I mean, I don't know if you feel a similar way, but I almost view like not that they shouldn't draft somebody. Like I think that this is very much a draft where they need to get more value too, because clearly, as we've seen, like the roster isn't quite what we thought it was last year. But it's like definitely getting towards the territory of, okay, not that we can't have draft picks, but we need talent now. Like, this isn't something we can wait for. Like, clearly all those rumblings have come out from before, like, when it sounds like forever ago, but the Drummond trade rumors were like a year and a half ago, man. Like,
Oh man, yeah, the
yeah, like that we
Capella. That's true. I almost forgot about that, but that definitely happened.
I had to remind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, I mean, exactly. Like, that was, yeah, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where you're already hearing rumors like, oh, you got to win for Trey. Like, not to be unfair to Trey. Like, I understand where he's coming from with that, but like, exactly, like where this team went this year, they can't really afford to be just a first round out team again next year. I mean, they're too talented to be that. At least, part of going to the conference finals, that ups the expectations, and that's where it makes things a little bit more murky for the draft, I guess would be the way to put it, or it changes up where you're at with it. But point
Yeah.
being, like, everything is context. Like, I think each team for me would have a different board. Like, you can have a concrete board, and I do, just to keep where I'm at in my head. But yeah, I mean, who I would draft would change on pretty much every team based on where they're at.
Oh yeah, that's definitely one of the things that about like I've done fully. I still have to at Dime. I do mock drafts and big boards and stuff, and like it is hard in a fully context because it, like you said, it changes for every team. The Hawks board will be different. Even as simple as something like the Hawks probably can't draft someone like Mark Williams because it's like he's a pure center. They have Capella, they have a Kongwu. Like it'd be a pretty hard ask for the Hawks to use a mid first round pick on a center, like on a center only player this year. I'm not saying they couldn't possibly do it, but like you have to take that's a very simple way to look at it. It's like him or Walker Kessler or whoever. Like you probably can't do that. I mean, maybe you could if you have a plan to trade other guys, but it is definitely context dependent. One of the guys that I wanted to ask you about is probably maybe the highest rated guy on my personal board that the Hawks might have a chance at. Like maybe you can squint your eyes is like someone like Dyson Daniels, who's like this defensive, really impressive guard. He probably will be gone by the time the Hawks pick, if I'm being realistic, because the Hawks pick at 16. But like I'm trying to always, because especially this early, I'm trying to thread the needle. Is like, okay, who is definitely going to be gone when the Hawks pick? Who is maybe available? And also, if we're being honest, one of the things the Hawks could do in this class is they could make a move to go up. They do have future facing assets. Like if there was a guy they fell in love with, they could go do that. They did it with DeAndre Hunter back in the day. So I'm trying not to ignore that like 5 to 12 tier because on paper, like, okay, these guys won't be available for the Hawks, but can they go get them? Sure, they could. So like, is there somebody in that even in that range that you might think would be a good fit with the Hawks? Like it probably isn't going to be our 16, but they could actually go get it if they wanted to.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like Dyson quite a bit. I'm probably not as high as others are. Like, to me, I think he's still a clear lottery guy. I can't.
Yeah,
some people are putting him like around like 7 or 8, and I'm not there. I'm not quite the believer in the upside. I was really excited about like at FIBA. I mean, I was really excited pre-FIBA about who he could be as maybe more of a shot creator, because for Australia he did a lot more running point and just like ball handling in general, and he really struggled at FIBA. And I think that kind of I don't want to say continued it with the G League, but it's more just changing your lens. Like I think he went from somebody who was like a real creator bet to being somebody who's like, okay, this guy could maybe run some secondary stuff. He doesn't really have a lot of burst. His handle isn't. No. He really struggles. Like any nail help can result in turnovers. Like he's. I think that there's room there for the handle to grow for sure as he develops more and matures physically. But like I just think what you're seeing now to me is not somebody who's going to become more of like a bursty ball handler or anything like that. But like just like you mentioned, like he's a good quick decision maker. He moves the ball. Even off drives, like he's good. Just he sees the court pretty well. It's not anything like flashy or crazy, but it's the kind of stuff where like I value it a lot. I just think that's the kind of player who I would want playing next to Trae Young. And I think what is interesting is he would definitely be like he doesn't make a lot of defensive errors right now. He's a good off-ball defender. He's good. Especially for his size, he's pretty solid on screen navigation. He definitely doesn't have the size yet. I think he's like 6'7", 6'8", but like about 180 or 190 pounds. So he's pretty thin right now. But I wouldn't say that he like plays weak or anything like that. Like he's definitely somebody who can fill out more. I think a lot's just going to depend on what kind of shooter he is. Like what level of shooter does he become? I think he definitely improved throughout the year as the year went on, which that was something for a lot of the G League Ignite guys. Like I'm still, just to be honest, like I'm still trying to figure out how to gauge G League Ignite sometimes because
same.
I mean, it's only been 2 years of it. I don't really like. I mean, Jalen Green was just kind of awesome all of his year at G League Ignite, and then you had like geez, I'm totally blanking. Like, I mean, Isaiah Todd was fine, and like then you had
Kai
other
Soto.
guys who just well, yes, yeah, that was an experiment. But like, I mean, like, yeah, this year, like Jaden Hardy really struggled to open the year. And then he got better, but it's just like I don't know how to gauge the development sometimes. So, but yeah, long story short, I would be very excited about Dyson to the Hawks.
Yeah, he'd be a guy I'd be looking for if they were to. I think again, probably have to go get him like actively, not just sit there at
Yeah.
16 and take him. But that's where we are right now. I have a couple guys to ask you about in a second, but first, a word from our sponsors on the show today. Today's podcast is brought to you by BetOnline, and it's May now, and baseball season is actually up and running at full steam. I'm covering that sport on another venue than this one. And of course, the basketball playoffs are actually going on right now in the NBA. A jam-packed slate of games is happening almost every night for your viewing pleasure. And with that in mind, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and information. This year, they have the latest odds, contests, futures, player props, exotics, and much more. And BetOnline is the best spot for all the latest developments in sports. That includes podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. Of course, not just basketball or baseball either. BetOnline has all the wagering information that you want across the board. That includes live betting and favorite casino games. And BetOnline also has other sports that are happening right now and also in the future. That includes horse racing and golf, esports, tennis, auto racing, hockey, MMA, boxing, cricket, soccer, entertainment bets, and much more. And futures markets are always available in the NFL, college football, etc. Super Bowl champions, conference titles, all this stuff is available to wager on right now at betonline.net. Head to that website right now, betonline.net, on your computer or mobile device at the moment. And if you will get there, you'll get to learn all about the trends and the action across the sports world. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Mark. Anybody else stick out to you? I mean, I've kind of been talking about the wings a lot with people recently. People always ask about the wings, and I think it's because of where the Hawks are roster-wise.
Mm-hmm.
But guys, who are often mocked in this range, whether it's like Malachi Branham or Ochai Agbaji, that kind of tier. I've got Tari Eason's been in the discussion too. I'm not even saying that has to be a wing, but what are your general feelings about this sort of like mid-first round, late lottery tier of guys that the Hawks are looking at in general?
Yeah. I love Tari Eason. Me and Jake are both like Tari, like 7 or 8. Like,
like
we love what he does. He's very erratic, I think is the best way to put it. But I think the Hawks kind of need somebody like that, if we're being honest. Like we talked about, like
he plays physically.
He's extremely physical, often too physical. Like he and Jeremy Sohan are kind of opposites. They're in like a similar type of mold and role, but like I think Jeremy's a lot more reined in while still doing a lot of the positive things. I don't mean in a bad way. But like Tari's, like his drives are like, he has some really interesting drives in the half court that like he'll have like some good dump offs at the rim and just do some good things when he gets there. But then there are other times where he like totally smothers his own drive because he's going so fast and like just like runs right into somebody. He's a really interesting player, and I do wonder what it would kind of look like with him being coached by Nate, like where Nate would be with some of his decision making. And but at the same time too, like if he's there around like, if he's there at 16, I mean that's a definite draft for me. Like he's probably like what'll be weird is just trying to figure out how he fits in. Like I think that if he's playing in a lineup, like obviously I don't think he's starting right away, but let's say that he's alongside John Collins and Clint Capella. I don't really think he's at a point yet where he's getting guarded like you want a 3 to get guarded, which makes it tough. A lot's going to depend on where his like how far his shot comes along. But I do think like it looked a lot better as the year went on for me. I'm a lot more confident in his shot and where it's going than where I am with Jeremy Sohan right now. And I actually think like Tari's a guy who could become a good enough offensive player where he's at least being guarded out to the 3-point line, which is, that opens up the drives and him being able to do more with the ball in his hands, just off the bounce or off the catch. So I'd be very in on him. Another guy, you mentioned Branham. I love Malachi Branham. I would be a little bit hesitant with the Hawks just because it hasn't really been nitpicked quite enough yet, but his defense is very bad right now.
Yeah, he came on really late. For people that don't know, like obviously people are sort of getting into the draft. Like he was not supposed to be a lottery pick 3 months ago, and he had a heck of a close to the season. And I think to your point about him not getting nitpicked, yeah, I think that's part of why, because he kind of wasn't on the radar.
Well, it's crazy too. Like not to like just go wild, but like so I live about 20 minutes from St. Vincent St. Mary's, so I've known about him for a while, and like I was excited for him at OSU. I thought he'd be an NBA guy, but He went from somebody who was like not even close to being ESPN top 100 on the draft board this year to like then becoming like he's getting ranked like 10th now. And so it's been a wild development.
Yeah, I think he's 11%. But my close personal friend Sam Massini, I think he has him 11 now, which kind of tells you how far it's gone because he was not up there for most of the season.
Exactly. But the defense is like, I do think he's going to get better at some things off the ball and on the ball, but his ability to get around screens is like null and void right now. He's got really wide shoulders. He has a pretty high base. Like that's stuff that you can't really coach. Like that's just, you have physical limitations sometimes as a defender. And that's kind of where I'm at with him right now. So I would be a little bit, it would be a little bit questionable alongside Trey. Although I do think the offense could be really good because like he's got pretty good feel. He makes good passes, especially out of pick and roll. Like he's definitely somebody who could create alongside him and would benefit playing off of him. But yeah, I would definitely have some defensive questions there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what I've seen as well. I guess the other thing I want to make sure I ask you about the Hawks in particular is like, do you like any of these like more guard types, like, ranging from, Johnny Davis to Ty or anybody else in this range, maybe even like Blake Wesley? People like him quite a bit. I'm not quite as high on Blake Wesley yet, but anybody else that's like more in that perimeter, like more in that guard level that you are intrigued by? Or is it just because for me, I think mostly these guys are either too high on the board for the Hawks to get. Like Ben Mathurin is going to be long gone, or like not quite high enough for me to get for the Hawks to take. But I wonder if you like anybody in that range.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Johnny Davis. If he somehow fell to 16, that would be awesome for the Hawks, in my opinion. Like, yeah, he's like a straight up two guard.
Definitely,
and
he's kind of small for a two guard, even. Like he's not. He's kind of. Everybody wishes he was 6'7". He's like 6'4".
I mean, I do too. But like he's one of my favorite players in the draft. I'm partially biased because I love watching him play, but he's somebody who I really think is just going to factor in well in a smaller role and be. Like, I don't think he's going to be an all defense guy or anything like that, but I do think he's going to be a pretty strong defender. Like to me, like I think I don't love doing comps, but he reminds me a lot of like, okay, if George Hill had like 20 pounds on him when he was at IUPUI or something like that, that kind of player, like just somebody who's going to be comfortable, doing the little things, factoring in as more of an off ball guy. He's so good moving off screens too, which is what makes me interested about him with Trey. I think some people question his shot a lot more than I do. Like I just kind of believe that it's going to be good in the NBA. Having that usage in Wisconsin's offense was like a death knell to efficiency to a degree. So I would be in on that. Obviously, again, you do kind of hinder yourself with the size, but I do think like he's just a really smart all around player that would fit well.
This is going to be more of a broad question, but let's say the Hawks either have to use some sort of capital or someone just miraculously falls to them. Outside of like your top 4 guys, let's say top 5 guys, who is the best possible guy for the Hawks to draft in your mind at 16 or higher?
Oh man, that's a good question.
I thought you were going to say Tari Eason for a second with the way you were talking about Tari Eason.
I mean, I would have Tari up there, except I do think like based on how I've seen on other stuff, it does seem like reasonable, like possible that he
might
will
be there. That's why I'm talking about him a lot too, just because I think he obviously big boards right now are not gospel, but he does seem to be in the range where like you would think he might be available.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how things shape out after the combine. I think he could definitely be a combine guy who goes way higher.
He could be.
To me, gosh, probably AJ Griffin. Like I do have, again, he's another guy who I have questions about. I'm not as high as some. Like I still think he's really good. I just think like I'm not as there with the upside as some people are. Like him becoming somebody who's handling the ball a lot. Like I think, like we talked about TJ Warren earlier, that's who I think of a lot when I watch AJ Griffin play. Like obviously shooting the 3 a lot more in college, but in terms of just like a wildly dominant footwork guy, like just anybody who he can get to his spots doing anything. Like he's so good moving off screens, just plays really well off the ball. He's not a great passer, which that also fits with TJ. No. But like he has length, he has size. I think he's going to be at least like a neutral defender in time in the NBA. Like it's worth noting how much time he missed prior to Duke too with injuries. So I'm not really that worried about his defense like some people are.
No.
But the shooting is legit. Like he is such.
It looks kind of weird sometimes, but
it looks weird. But it's like the release point is so high. He gets good height on his jumper, and he can hit it off a variety of motions. So I'm just I'm varying on it. I definitely have questions about, what kind of player is going to be inside the arc outside of jumpers, but at the same time, like getting to play alongside Trey in an offense that I think is going to be a lot better run. I'm very excited about that, if that could be a thing.
Yeah, he'd be high on my list too. It goes without barring something very weird that have to trade up to get him for sure. I can't imagine getting to 16. There's just too much there. But he'd be high on my list too. I mean, I've had him as high as 5 at times. I don't know if I'd be there still now. I have more work to do on that, and I do wonder how much you mentioned the injuries. How much the injuries have taken away some of his burst. Because like I thought he was more bursty in high school than he looks now, and maybe he's just gotten bigger and older and all that stuff. But I kind of wonder like if this is going to be it for him athletically. Not that it's bad, but like I thought he at one point he was going to be kind of a monster athletically in high school. I don't know if that's the case now. He's just, I mean, obviously he makes up for it with a lot of other stuff, but I kind of I'm just curious to see what like an NBA strength conditioning, health kind of stuff looks like for him too.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like he's interesting because to me, like he could be somebody very much like Moses Moody, who everybody was saying, oh, this guy should go 6 or 7. And then inexplicably falls. And it turns out like, I mean, I believe it came out after like he had some pretty rough medicals from teams that ended up leading him falling as far as he did. And I'm curious to see. Yeah, it happens. It feels like every other year it happens with somebody, and it very well could be AJ.
Yeah, it was almost a Kongwu. There was the pre-draft leaks about a Kongwu, and he still went, of course, 6. But like there was a little bit of concern there. There's always a guy or two, unfortunately, that ends up falling because of that stuff. Okay, before we get into some of what I would describe as your guys, I'm going to ask you about who your guys are, because everybody has their guys in the draft, and I also want to know what you think about the very top of the draft. But first, our final break on the podcast. Be right back with more with myself and Mark. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar, and summer is coming. If you're anything like me, it actually means some food on the go in the next couple of months. And Built Bar is the perfect snack to take it with you on vacations, whether you're by yourself or with your family. Throw them in your bags, toss them in your kids' backpacks. Make sure that everyone has a bar so you're fueled for your summer adventures. And the best part about Built Bar is they're actually healthy and delicious as well. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can actually have both. It's actually quite easy as well. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order right now. They have Built Bars and Puffs, and everything is covered in 100% chocolate. And that means with Built Bar, you can actually eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. If you haven't tried Built Puffs yet, I don't know what you're waiting for at this point. They actually have great flavors like banana cream pie, which has been my personal favorite of mine, honestly. And you picture how it will taste right now, to be honest. Just think about banana cream pie, how good that actually is. Not enough flavor for you. You might actually want to try Mixed Box as well. Mixed Boxes come with 12 flavors of bars and puffs all in one place. And Built Bar is also healthy for you. Most bars have only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 70 grams of protein, whilst most candy bars have a lot more sugar and a lot more calories than that. So Built Bar tastes fantastic while also being quite healthy. And if you go to Built.com right now, get all of your favorites from banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, and many more. They're delicious, and new flavors coming all the time. Built.com is everything that you want. And if you go there now, use promo code LOCK15, 15% off on your order with Built Bar. One more time, that is promo code LOCK15, 15% off at Built.com. All right, Mark, before we get to your top of the board, I asked this to everybody that I have on about the draft. Do you have a couple of guys that you seem to be super high on compared to everybody else? It could be second round guys, it could be first round guys, wherever you want to go with this. Who are your guys you seem to be in love with?
Man, that's such a good question. I love Jabari Walker out of Tennessee. He's really fun. He doesn't make a lot of sense for the Hawks, just a full honesty, but
you mean out of Colorado, right? Not Tennessee.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Colorado. I'm thinking of the game he played against Tennessee.
No, you're good.
He's really fun. Like he's Samaki Walker's son. So big throwback to the Big Shorts days. But like he is a pretty good shooter. He really came along as the season went on. Like I liked what he showed last year. But then this year he took on a bigger role. It was really funky because Colorado's offense, I don't want to say it was like terrible or anything, but he was essentially like playing as a secondary option on a team without a real primary option. So it was just like, it felt very weird at times. He's to me like very similar to Tari, talking about somebody who's kind of erratic. Like he has really weird movements, which I always just love guys who are long, athletic, play physically, and just have kind of funk to their game. Like his handle's really clunky, but he is really good driving the ball. Or I shouldn't even say good. Like he makes things happen driving the ball, which sometimes it's turnovers, other times it's dunks. So, you just never know. But just having somebody who's 6'9", close to 6'10", that has really good defensive instincts and ability, that is I would say going to be a plus shooter. Like if you can rein in anything with his handle, I think he's going to be a really good player in the NBA for a while. Not like a star or anything, but I think he'll be a good role player. And I honestly, like if he were on a better team, because the Pac-12 was just pretty rough this year overall, which is becoming a theme. If he were on a better team, I do think he'd be getting a lot more buzz. So he's somebody up there for me. The other guy I am, again, biased about as an Ohio person. I went to the University of Toledo. So I saw Ryan in person his last year because I was a senior when he was a freshman. Ryan Rollins can be really good. I like him a lot. He's more of a combo guard, which always gets kind of like a bad rap. I love combo guards, though. He's so good at creating space. He's like, obviously he's not Luka, but just in kind of that same vein of somebody who I wouldn't necessarily consider an elite athlete, but he has elite athletic tools that you don't really, it's not like along the bigger, faster, stronger vein that you typically think of when thinking of athleticism. Like he's got incredibly good bend and flexibility, and he's so good at snatchbacks or anything to setting his man up into screens, and just he has really good craft on the interior. I think a lot's going to depend on what kind of shooter he becomes from three. He was around I think like 32 or 33% this year. He was better last year, but also a lot of it's high difficulty of threes. Obviously, was the primary option too. And he's a really good mid-range shooter off difficult looks. So I just tend to buy guys like that as shooters at the next level, developing into better 3-point shooters. What makes it tough for him is like he's kind of, I don't want to say a starter or bust, but like most of his potential to me comes from what he could be as a shot maker. So it's not as easy as I think some people make it out to be to just become a bench shot maker in the league. Like you have Jordan Clarkson and like 4 other guys who actually get paid to be bench shot makers outside the minimum. So, but I really like him. His defense is very stinky right now, but I do think there's a really good player under there. So I'm excited to see what happens with him.
Yeah, I was watching him a little bit more. He was not on my radar because I'm way behind this class, and I thought I saw some buzz for him, and I like what I saw too. Like it's I don't always share your love for combo guards, but
he's different because he's a good passer. Like
I was going to say,
he sees the court really well.
I like his offensive stuff a lot. I do think that you worry, like you kind of perfectly laid out, like what happens if he's not good enough as a scorer, because like there's not really a lot to fall back on there. And that's always my concern. I always find myself being a little bit lower on the guys who are like, clearly, backcourt score, maybe not score only, but score mostly types that don't do a whole lot else. Like, for instance, like Cam Thomas was not my guy last year. Was not a big fan of Cam Thomas. Not that he can't. I mean, and I acknowledge like he's very good at what he does. It's just that's all he does, and like it's got to work. And if it works, it works. I mean, if it works, you're talking about Jamal Crawford, and it's fine. But it's just interesting to me.
It's really difficult to be Jamal Crawford. Yeah, exactly. Like, but it's like, I mean, you just bring up a really good point. Like, it's hard to be one dimensional in the NBA now. Like we talked about the roster earlier. Yesterday, I should say.
And teams know too. It's like they know, especially at the highest levels, that like you become not unplayable, but like if you watch Jordan Clarkson in the playoff series, it's like it's unless he's got 20 points and a half, it's like hard to play him. That's how bad he is on defense and stuff. So it's like, all right, what are you actually building for is the other question.
Exactly. And that's why, not to keep pumping him, but like if you like just watching Ryan, what makes him so interesting to me is like I do think he has a lot of playmaking to fall back on. Not somebody who I think is going to be like a primary engine or anything, but somebody who, if the shot comes along the way I think it will, which I very much buy in, becoming like a really good shooter from deep on pull-ups and any variety of shots, then that's like a special starting level player to me.
And there's way more of a path too. Even if it doesn't work as a starter, like if you have a playmaking, you could be a third guard, and there's some real value in that if you're more than just a scorer. Like
exactly,
play a little point guard, whatever you need to do, and just be a secondary, or maybe be a secondary next to a big playmaking wing. There's ways you can get in and get on the floor. So, okay. Last thing before we get out of here, this is the easiest way to say this. Do you have the same top 4 as everybody else in the class?
I think I do, but in different order. I know I have a different top 5 than everybody else.
The orders are all messed up for everybody, I feel like, at this, which is fine. That's probably the way it should be. Okay, give me your current big board, I guess, at the top.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, just well noting the top 5 changes for me based on, who is getting drafted where and who has the pick. Like, for
Agreed.
instance, let's say if the Pelicans somehow had the first overall pick, I would probably take Jaden Ivey. I think some people would disagree with that, but they clearly need guard play. They need guys who can get to the rim. Um, I love Powell. I just don't like they have almost too. I think a lot of people say you can never have too many wings slash forwards, but I also think like, okay, how am I supposed to play him, Trey Murphy the third, Herb Jones, and Zion together? Like, I
And
think that
Ingram,
there are
and
ways that
Ingram,
happen.
and Zion. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, it's just given the kind of player he's going to be. I'm not like I love Powell. I think he's gonna be the best player in the class personally, but um, like yeah. So my top 5 right now, if I just had to go in order, it'd be Paolo, Chet Holmgren, Jaden Ivey, Jabari Smith, and then my number 5 is Jalen Duren, which most people would probably disagree with, but I am very in on Jalen Duren. Some of the stuff that he showed at Memphis and when he was at Montford too, I just see it with him. Like that Memphis context was really rough this year. Not to just give him leeway that I think other people will get, but
No, you're right. It
um,
was. It was very rough.
yeah, like I think, yeah, it was rough. But to me, like he's the youngest player in the draft class. Age doesn't factor in a ton, but in seeing the things that he has done, in the ways that he did improve when he was at Memphis, like getting to show more as a playmaker and passer, he's still very raw on both ends. But I think that's part of the upside with him. Like he still impacts the game a ton, even while being very raw. I think that there's a non-zero chance that he's the best defensive player in the draft when it's all said and done, which is saying a lot considering Chet's in the draft. Like I think just based on pure tools, Jalen probably has better tools than Chet, which is again, that's not saying a ton. Like he's much better in ground coverage. Chet's very good in short area stuff, and his feel on that end is second to none. But I just look at Jalen, and I think he could be a lot more than just a lob catcher, rim finisher guy that a lot of people seem to pin him in as.
No, it's interesting. I definitely have probably watched him less than
I
a
can't
lot
blame
of the
you
guys at
because
the top,
they
just
are
because
very
of
hard to watch.
that too. I mean, it's funny. I probably watched them more from a college standpoint and like have done less NBA draft specific watching on Jalen Duren than a lot of the other top guys. Part of that's because of the team I cover, and he just has there's no way the Hawks are going to get Jalen Duren. But it's like, yeah, he's definitely interesting. I think that there was a reason he was. If not number 1 guy in the class below this before he reclassified, definitely in the top 3. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm with you 100% on like reordering the top 3, 4, 5 based on who has the pick. I don't have a clear number 1. I changed my personal order multiple times. I like Paolo as well. I think I probably have Chet number 1 if I had to just choose right now, but the gap is not wide at all. Like I think that it's just a tool bet. It's kind of what you want. I used to think I was probably too low on Jaden Ivey. I've come a long way on him. I think that he's still number 4 for me of those guys, but I still think that he's also like firmly number 4. Like for a while, I was like, is he really a top 4 guy? And then I watched more. I'm like, all right, I get it.
Yeah.
So a long way to go on that, but it definitely is team specific, which is tough to do on a national or whatever podcast talking about just broad circumstances, because it's like, all right, trying to pit these guys against each other one-on-one is like Jabari Smith is great at a lot of things and not great at other things, and like he's really fun though at certain spots. Like, is he a wing? I don't even know. Is he a 4? I don't know. We'll see.
Exactly. It's like I don't know. I think some people are pretty down on this draft just from a talent perspective. I would say too, just as like an aside,
Yeah.
like our other mutual friend PUI wrote a really great piece on this earlier in the season, but like these guys, even compared to last year, have had such a different experience getting to the college level than like pretty much any class before them. Like, I mean, Paolo literally, like everybody like talks about like, oh, Paolo just doesn't look like himself at the beginning of the year. I'm like, well, he didn't play competitive basketball for almost a year. Like he was just strictly working out in gyms because of how the pandemic affected the West Coast and where he was at. And there are multiple guys who are coming from similar areas with that. So I am, again, I think I try and approach it like I'm not an expert. I just watch a lot of basketball. Like these guys, I have no idea what to think about what some of their growth curves might look like, or might not look like, just because of how the pandemic went and changed things up developmentally. Because we just never really seen anything like it on this scale before. So definitely something to note too and especially when people want to go back and do historical stuff, which I'm sure will not be in good faith anyways, but I figured I would throw it out there anyways.
It never is, but no, you're 100% right. I think this is it's a weird class. I don't think it's a great class at the top. I don't think there's not a guy that is like a no question superstar for me. I think that's okay. I mean, doesn't mean the class is bad. And I think the odds are that one of those guys probably hits and is a superstar. It's just, or at least a fringe superstar. But we'll see who that guy is. And maybe there'll be somebody off the radar. I mean, the last question I'll ask you is like, maybe it's Jalen Duren, because you already gave it away. But like, I was going to ask you if there's a guy that's not in your top 3 or 4 that like could be the best player in the class overall.
Ooh, man, that's a tough question. I don't know. I mean, I guess I could say maybe it's Shaedon Sharpe. Like, I don't know. I don't want to box him in, but like maybe it's Shaedon Sharpe. Like he's somebody who's just really hard for me because he is like, what's the best way to put it? Like, I think if he were burstier, I would be more in on him. Like again, I think he has just about the best shot creation tools in the class. But I also am just kind of like, okay, well, he's not an awesome passer. Like, I don't think that the handle is anything amazing from him right now. It's more just like the tools that he has been able to show. And again, really hard with not having as much tape recently. But like, let's say if things really do hit with him, then yeah, that's a nutty prospect. But at the same time, I'm just a little bit hesitant because like, even like I look at somebody like Jaden, like he's showing shot creation stuff, but the burst and ability to just destroy a defense with his first step that's something that is really hard to not bet on.
When he has it going, it's difficult to stop. Like,
just ask Texas. Yeah.
I mean, there were maybe not full game. There were halves where he was just genuinely unstoppable this year that I've watched multiple of. So like, it's college, but his athletic traits are pretty off the charts too, which definitely helps. So. All right, Mark. Well, I've taken up a lot of your time on this Friday into the weekend. Thank you for doing this in the middle of what you described as the most busy day of your life, or something like that, before we started recording. Please feel free to plug anything you'd like, my friend. I do appreciate it. Maybe I'll beg you to come back on later on in the process. But until then,
I would love to. I would love to come back on. I always enjoy talking, Brad. You can find me on Twitter at MG_Schindler. I write over at basketballnews.com. I write over at WNBA.com as well, covering the league startup tonight. Be sure to watch the games. They're great. I also cover the draft over at my Patreon and my podcast, Tag the Roll, with my good friend and co-host Jake Rosen. And covering the NBA and doing some draft stuff right now as well over at Indie Cornrows with the great Caitlin Cooper. So yeah, you can find me. Twitter is definitely the best place to find me for sure.
You will share it all. Former guest of this podcast, Caitlin Cooper, who came on and talked about Nate with me when the Hawks first hired Nate, and I think we were probably right about Nate in a lot of ways on that discussion, because Caitlin's very smart. But all right, well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. As for everybody else, please subscribe to this podcast. Check out all of Mark's work, and we'll see you next time.